The content on the Untold Tales channel is protected by copyright. Unauthorized use may result in legal liability. At the military base in an unnamed desert, every gust of wind that lifted the sand felt like a harbinger of trouble. The air was saturated with the scent of gasoline and metal, and a tangible tension hung in the atmosphere in anticipation of the upcoming operation. Jack, stood apart from the bustling crowd, staring into the void. My muscles were tense, like strings ready to snap into action at any moment. An officer approached us with a stack of letters, handing them out and calling each name. Everyone froze in anticipation. Robertson, Myers, Smith. The names rang out. Each step forward meant a brief connection with home, with loved ones who remained only shadows in our military reality. When the officer finished distributing the letters, I was left standing in place, never hearing my name. My friend Tom approached me, a letter in his hands. His face lit up with a smile as he looked at the envelope. "Who's it from?" I asked, shifting my gaze to him. "My wife," he replied with a grin, scanning the first few lines. Tom paused for a moment, his face softening with a warm memory. "She writes that our little girl has started walking. I can't believe I missed that. Marie, my wife, always tries to keep me updated. I don't know what I'd do without her support," he shared, his eyes briefly glimmering with both sadness and pride. After a short pause, where we both drifted into our own thoughts, Tom looked at me with a question that seemed to linger in the air. "And why don't you get married?" I shrugged. A mix of determination and regret reflected in my eyes. "You see, Tom, I'm not ready to tie someone to this kind of life. We both know what it means to live on the edge. I just don't want someone waiting for me at home, not knowing if I'll ever come back." Tom nodded, understanding the weight of my words. "It's a tough choice, but everyone has their own path, right?" "That's right," I confirmed, and my gaze once again drifted to the horizon, where a sandstorm was beginning to form. That conversation left me with thoughts about the choices we make and the sacrifices we endure in military service. A siren abruptly ended our talk, signaling our readiness for the challenges ahead. Hours of intense combat awaited us, where each of us would have to rely only on our comrades and our own strength. As we approached the target, an unsettling silence settled over the area, the calm before the storm, a foreboding presence that often precedes danger in combat. I took responsibility for covering Tom, who specialized in setting explosives. We moved forward cautiously, each step feeling too loud, each breath too sharp. Suddenly, amidst the dead silence, the sharp crack of dry branches and a faint rustling signaled the approach of the enemy. Instinctively, I dropped lower, signaling to Tom to do the same. In the moonlight, our shadows stretched across the rocky terrain, creating the illusion of a larger force. "Careful, possible ambush," I whispered, preparing for battle. Within seconds, silhouettes of enemy fighters emerged from behind the nearest rock formation. "Contact!" I shouted as the first bullets whistled through the air. I returned fire, creating as much noise and chaos as possible to give Tom a clear path to his target. The firefight escalated rapidly. The enemy was well-trained and had the advantage of strategic positions. I used every opportunity to maneuver between the rocks, ensuring Tom had a clear route. My shots were precise, each one aimed at suppressing enemy fire. At a critical moment, when Tom was nearly at his objective, I noticed an enemy sniper locking onto him. Without hesitation, I lunged forward, moving to a better vantage point to provide cover. My heart pounded, adrenaline surged through my veins as I sprinted between cover, drawing enemy attention toward myself. Just as I reached position, a shot rang out from behind the rock. The bullet whizzed past my ear with a deafening hiss before slamming into my side. A searing pain tore through me as I crashed to the ground, feeling warm blood seep through my uniform. "Medic needed," I gasped into my radio, pressing my hand against the wound, trying to slow the bleeding. Despite the excruciating pain, my eyes remained locked on Tom, who, using my maneuver, successfully completed his mission. While Tom rushed toward me, I continued to resist, firing with one hand. Each shot sent a jolt of pain through my body like an electric shock, but I knew I had to hold on. After Tom helped me to my feet, we began our retreat, leaving the combat zone under the cover of our comrades, who now took the initiative into their own hands. After successfully completing the mission, Tom and I found ourselves in a critical situation. He grabbed me under my arm, trying to help me up so we could get out of the firefight zone as quickly as possible. I struggled to suppress the pain and stay focused, but each step was a battle. The wound in my side pulsed with sharp, burning pain, a constant reminder of how close I'd come death. "Hold on, brother. We're almost there," Tom said, his voice full of determination and support. As soon as we started moving back, the other members of our unit provided covering fire. They positioned themselves advantageously, opening fire on the enemy fighters who attempted to pursue us. The sounds of gunfire and explosions merged into a deafening cacophony, the air thick with the acrid scent of gunpowder and dust. At that moment, from behind a rocky outcrop, our combat medic appeared, rushing toward us with a medical kit slung over his shoulder. He quickly assessed the situation and began administering first aid on the spot, trying to stop the bleeding and ease the pain. "We need to evacuate him immediately," he said, addressing Tom and the others. One of the soldiers, Rick, a seasoned, strong guy, took it upon himself to support me from the other side. Together, they carefully lifted me, forming something like a makeshift chair with their arms. Step by step, covering one another, my team continued to retreat to a safer location. Each of them was ready to risk their lives to save a comrade. In the distance, the sound of an approaching evacuation helicopter began to reach us. Against the dark night sky, it was barely visible, but its arrival filled us with hope. I could feel my strength fading, yet at the same time, I was overwhelmingly grateful for the courage and dedication of my comrades. By the time we reached the prearranged evacuation point, the helicopter had already landed nearby, its rotor blades kicking up dust and small gravel. The medical team wasted no time, immediately setting to work, lifting me onto a stretcher and carrying me into the helicopter. Tom and Rick followed closely behind, refusing to leave my side for even a second. As the helicopter ascended, I looked down at the rugged landscape, illuminated by the flashes of ongoing gunfire. A wave of mixed emotions washed over me, relief and bitterness. The mission had been completed successfully, but at the cost of my injury. However, thanks to the selflessness and professionalism of my team, I was still alive, with hope for a full recovery. Upon arrival at the military hospital, I was immediately taken into the operating room. I was still half conscious when they pulled me from the helicopter, carrying me on the stretcher through the long, sterile corridors. Bright surgical lights flickered above me, one after another, creating a strobing effect in my foggy mind. Inside the operating room, there was an atmosphere of tense concentration. Doctors and nurses moved swiftly and professionally, preparing everything necessary for the surgical procedure. One of the surgeons, noticing my distress, leaned over me, holding an anesthesia mask. "We're going to put you under now, and everything will be fine. You're safe." His voice was calm and reassuring. The anesthesia took effect quickly, and I sank into a deep, oblivious sleep where reality and dreams began to blur together. I felt no time, heard no sounds, saw no faces around me. In this endless void, I felt as if I was floating between life and death. The surgery was complex and lasted for several hours. The doctors worked with absolute focus because my condition was critical. The bullet had damaged vital internal organs, and severe blood loss posed a life-threatening risk. An experienced surgeon led the operation, methodically stopping the bleeding and repairing the damaged tissue. Every movement of his hands was precise and confident. Every decision made quickly and effectively. Gradually, after several hours of intense effort, the medical team managed to stabilize me. When the surgery was finally complete, they carefully closed the wound, applying all necessary antiseptic and regenerative treatments to minimize the risk of infection and speed up the healing process. Waking up from anesthesia was slow and painful. At first, I felt a deep chill in my entire body, Then sensation began to return, and with it a sharp, burning pain in my side where the wound was. I tried to focus on my breathing, forcing myself not to dwell on the pain, when I heard soft, reassuring voices of the medical staff around me. The surgery was successful. You're going to be fine. A doctor's voice reached me as he checked my vitals on the monitor. The first days after the operation were filled with pain and slow recovery. I spent most of my time in a semi-conscious state, interrupted by brief moments of wakefulness when nurses checked my vitals, changed my bandages, and kept me in proper condition for healing. With each passing day, my strength began to return, and I started to realize that my survival was nothing short of a miracle, achieved thanks to the skill and determination of the military hospital's medical team. One day, as I was gradually regaining awareness after yet another medical procedure, a new nurse approached my bedside. She introduced herself as Alice. Her voice was soft and soothing, her smile warm and genuine. She was petite, with bright blue eyes and blonde hair neatly tied in a bun. "How are you feeling today, Jack?" she asked, recording my vitals in the medical chart. Her gaze was full of sympathy and professional interest. "Better than yesterday," I replied, trying to smile through the pain. Alice nodded, continuing to take her notes. "I am glad to hear that. You have been very strong these past few days," she said, handing me a glass of water. Her movements were smooth and confident, each one carefully measured to avoid causing me any discomfort. "Thank you," I mumbled, accepting the water. "Your presence here. It feels like a ray of light in a dark place." Alice blushed slightly and smiled. "It is part of my job, but I'm glad I can make your stay here a little easier." We continued talking, and Alice told me a little about herself. She had graduated from medical school a few years ago and had always dreamed of helping people in difficult situations. "I like feeling that I am doing something important, something that truly matters," she explained. Over the next few days, Alice regularly took care of me, and I began looking forward to her visits. Her attention to detail and genuine care made my days significantly more bearable. Every time she appeared, it brought relief from the loneliness and pain that filled my time in the hospital. One morning, as Alice was checking my bandages, I noticed how carefully she avoided causing me any pain. "You are very attentive, Alice," I said, sincerely grateful to her. She smiled in response. "It is my job, Jack. I want you to recover as soon as possible." "I do not know what I would do without you," I admitted, and it was the absolute truth. In the hospital, amidst the endless flow of medical staff and procedures, Alice had become a symbol of hope and humanity for me. With each passing day, my health improved, and Alice played a huge role in that. She was not just doing her job. She took the time to make my stay more comfortable. She would check on me, ensuring I was feeling all right, but soon, our conversations extended beyond medical matters. We started talking about personal things, our families, hobbies, the books we loved, and the music we enjoyed. Alice was passionate about painting, and she told me about her favorite artists and the exhibitions she had visited. In return, I shared stories from my service, the countries I had traveled to, and the dreams I wanted to fulfill once I fully recovered. One evening, when the hospital room had already sunk into twilight, and only the soft glow of a bedside lamp illuminated the space, Alice came to check on me, as usual. She sat down next to me, and we started talking. Our conversation gradually shifted from everyday topics to something more personal. "Jack, I see how you grow stronger every day, and it inspires me," she said with a smile. I looked at her and saw genuine admiration in her eyes. "Alice, I feel the same way. Your stories, your outlook on life, all of it helps me feel better," I replied. And it was true. I felt a special connection between us, something that seemed to go beyond the typical relationship between a nurse and her patient. Alice gently touched my hand, her touch warm and soft. "I'm glad I can help, Jack. You have become more than just a patient to me," she admitted. Her voice was barely audible, but every word resonated deep within me. At that moment, I realized that my feelings for Alice extended beyond gratitude for her care. I had developed a deep affection for her, and it felt mutual. Our conversations had become the highlight of my days, filled with loneliness and painful procedures. Over time, our growing closeness became evident not only to us, but to the rest of the hospital staff. Alice started spending more time with me, even when her shift was over. We discussed books we could read together and movies we would watch once I recovered and was able to leave the hospital. Every minute spent together brought us closer, and I felt that something special was forming between us, something that helped me not only fight my injuries, but also gave my life new meaning. The day of my discharge arrived sooner than expected. The last few weeks in the hospital had flown by like a moment, thanks to the time I'd spent with Alice. We both felt a mix of emotions, joy at my recovery and sadness at the upcoming farewell. In the morning, as I was packing my belongings, Alice entered the room. She was dressed in her usual medical uniform, but today, there was more sadness on her face than usual. "It feels so strange to think that you are leaving today," she said, helping me fold my things. "Yes, it is strange," I replied, trying to smile. "But I am so grateful to you for everything you have done for me. You have truly changed my life over these past weeks." Alice nodded, and I noticed her eyes filling with tears. "I will miss you, Jack, but I'm glad you have recovered. That is the most important thing." "Alice, let's not lose touch," I suggested, taking her hands. "Let's write letters to each other. I want to know how you are doing and tell you about my life on the base." She smiled through her tears. "I would love that. I will be waiting for your letters." When the time came to leave, we walked out of the hospital room together. Outside, in front of the hospital, I turned to Alice. She stood there, hugging herself against the cool wind. Despite the chill in the air, her eyes were warm and filled with light. I stepped closer to her, and we embraced. "Thank you for everything," I whispered in her ear. She hugged me tightly in response, and, as a farewell, kissed me, quickly but gently, as if it was the only thing she could give me to remember her by. "Take care of yourself, Jack," she whispered. "You too, Alice." Until our next letters, I said, letting go of her and heading toward the vehicle that would take me back to the base. As I got into the car, I turned back one last time. Alice was still standing there, waving at me. I waved back, feeling my heart tighten with longing for her. But I knew this was not goodbye. This was just the beginning of something new, something we would build from a distance, through words written from heart to heart. Returning to the base upon arriving back at the base, a surge of emotions washed over me. The moment I stepped out of the vehicle, I immediately felt the exhilarating warmth of reunion as my comrades surrounded me. They had lined up, waiting for my return, and their faces lit up with joy at seeing me healthy and back in action. Tom was one of the first to approach me. His greeting was not just joyful, but deeply grateful. He pulled me into a firm embrace, his eyes reflecting sincerity and unspoken emotion. "Jack, you saved me out there. I will never forget that," he said, his voice filled with emotion, mirroring the deep bond we shared and the debt of gratitude he felt toward me. "It had to be done, Tom. We always cover each other," I replied, feeling a surge of pride, not just for my actions, but for the strength of our team. We talked about that day, and with each word, Tom emphasized just how crucial my decision to act had been in our line of work. Moments like these prove that brotherhood and support are not just words. They're the foundation of our daily survival, the force that holds us together in the most challenging circumstances. After our reunion, we headed to the mess hall, where a small celebration had already been arranged in my honor. The tables were set, and the atmosphere was filled with camaraderie and joy. Everyone was happy to have me back, and the evening turned into a celebration of life and friendship. Laughter, conversations about recent events, and discussions of future plans blended into a single stream of cheerful interaction. Tom mentioned more than once the day I covered him, and his words of gratitude were repeated throughout the evening. It reminded me how important it was to cherish every moment we spend together, because in our work, every new day could bring a new challenge. As the celebration came to an end, I felt exhausted but deeply satisfied, knowing that I had returned home, to the base, where each of us was ready to be a pillar of support and protection for one another. This return was not just the closing of a chapter in my life. It was the beginning of a new one, where I was ready to face any challenges, knowing that I had true friends and brothers in arms by my side. The last months of service after my return to the base, the remaining 6 months of service passed in a tightly packed schedule of missions. We were constantly deployed on various operations, ranging from local patrols to special combat missions against armed groups. Each mission demanded our utmost concentration and unwavering support for one another, further solidifying us as a unified team. But despite the intense schedule, I always looked forward to Alice's letters. They became beams of light cutting through the routine of military life. She shared details about her daily life, small joys, and worries. She also spoke openly about our future together, about her dreams and plans. Her words filled me with warmth and optimism. One letter stood out among the rest. Her words about our wedding. Alice wrote, "Every day, I imagine us walking together down quiet streets, building our cozy home, and taking care of each other. It might sound like a dream, but I believe that soon it will become our reality." Those lines made my heart race, because in those dreams, I, too, began to see our future. Alice also described in great detail how she imagined our wedding. "I see us happy and in love, surrounded by friends and family on this important day. I cannot wait for you to come back so we can start planning our wedding." Her enthusiasm and excitement were so strong that I could not help but share her feelings. I responded to each of her letters with the same tenderness and love. We shared thoughts about what our ceremony should be like and how we envision our home. These letters became more than just a way to stay connected. They became a promise of a new life that we would begin together upon my return. Every word I wrote to Alice was filled with deep emotion and hope for a future full of happiness and love. After one particularly dangerous operation, where I had managed to prove myself and prevent serious casualties in our unit, the command decided to reward me. To my surprise and delight, I was granted a week-long leave, a rare and valuable reward under our circumstances. The idea of how to spend this week came to me instantly. I decided to surprise Alice and visit her without warning. Gathering the essentials, I boarded the first flight that would bring me closer to the city where Alice was still working at the hospital. The anticipation of seeing her again mixed with a slight nervousness. How would she react to my sudden arrival? Arriving in the city late at night, I took a taxi and headed straight to the hospital. The road felt endless. Every mile stretched my impatience further. When I finally arrived, the night shift had just begun, and I approached the reception desk to ask about Alice. "Good evening. I came to visit Nurse Alice. Could you tell me where I can find her?" I asked the duty administrator. After a brief check, she looked at me with a hint of surprise in my military uniform and replied, "I'm sorry, sir, but Alice is not on shift today. She took the day off." My disappointment was almost tangible. I did not know what to do next. I stood there, lost in thought. Then an idea struck me. Alice had mentioned her home address in one of her letters, describing how much she loved spending her mornings in her garden. I quickly took out my phone, found that letter, entered the address into the GPS, and ordered another taxi. The drive to Alice's house took about 20 minutes. As I approached, I scanned the surroundings. It was a quiet, cozy neighborhood where each house was surrounded by a well-kept green yard. Alice's house stood out with its neatly trimmed lawn and bright flower beds lining the path leading to the front door. When the taxi stopped, I stepped out and stood still for a moment, gathering my thoughts. Before knocking on the door, I decided to walk around the house to see the garden Alice had written so much about. I expected to find her there, tending to her plants, but instead I saw something that froze me in place. Walking toward a large window that overlooked the backyard, I stopped. Through the glass, I saw Alice, and she was not alone. She stood in the embrace of an unfamiliar man, their lips locked in a passionate kiss. Alice was wearing only a light, semi-transparent blouse and shorts that clung to her delicate curves. Her skin shimmered under the soft glow of the moonlight, and every movement she made was filled with the kind of tenderness and sensual closeness that I had believed was meant only for us. My heart stopped. Inside my chest, a storm of emotions erupted: betrayal, rage, deep disappointment. Every touch, Every motion between them carried the intimacy that I had thought belonged to Alice and me alone. Every second of this scene stretched into eternity, and I stood there, unable to look away, until the full weight of realization struck me. I was witnessing the destruction of all my dreams of a future with Alice. I stepped away from the window, feeling my hands tremble and my breath grow heavy. How could Alice do this? Thoughts swirled chaotically in my mind. All the letters she had sent me, all the words of love and dreams of our future together, had they all been lies? With every step I took away from her house, I felt something inside me break irreparably, leaving behind only emptiness and pain that nothing could ever fill. I stood there, staring through the window at the painfully intimate scene. Alice and her stranger continued to embrace, their bodies moving with such grace and passion that it seemed as if they were melting into one. She looked so desired, her blouse barely covering her, exposing the curves of her body. This man touched her the way I had dreamed of touching her, and watching it was unbearable. God damn it, this hurts. Every laugh, every whisper, I could only imagine what they were saying to each other, felt like a knife slicing through my heart. The desire to walk away, to turn my back on this, and keep whatever dignity I had left, battled with the excruciating need to stay and see more. What if this wasn't what it seemed? What if this was just a misunderstanding? But no, every movement they made, every gesture spoke otherwise. They were too close, too connected, and I stood there behind the window like a fool, feeling betrayed, alone, and abandoned. Something inside me awoke, the soldier in me, the one trained to fight, to survive in the harshest conditions. I had been taught not to shy away from reality, no matter how brutal it was. But this was a different kind of battle. This was a war for my own heart, a fight between the urge to stay and the need to leave to preserve the last remnants of my dignity. Damn it, Alice, how could you? I whispered, barely audible, clenching my fists so tightly that my nails dug into my palms. My breathing quickened, and I felt anger mixing with despair. I had to make a choice. Stay and confront her, demand answers, or walk away right now and let this chapter of my life close forever. With every second I stood there behind that window, my heart felt more shattered, my soul more hollow. Unable to endure the tension and the storm of emotions tearing through me, I moved decisively toward the front door. Everything inside me screamed of betrayal. Every cell in my body demanded answers. My steps were heavy but determined. When I reached the door, I didn't wait for an invitation. I didn't knock. I grabbed the handle, and to my surprise, it was unlocked. With a forceful push, I stormed inside. Alice and her stranger jerked apart, turning to face me with expressions of pure shock and terror. A thick silence settled in the room, broken only by the sound of my heavy breathing. Alice, am I interrupting? My words dripped with venom, each syllable laced with irony and pain. Who is this man? My voice shook with rage. My gaze locked onto the stranger who had just been sharing something so intimate with Alice. Alice, blushing and clearly rattled, tried to speak, but the words stuck in her throat. Jack, it's not what you think, she finally choked out, her voice barely above a whisper. Her hands trembled as she struggled to explain herself. She glanced at the man, then back at me, desperately searching my eyes for some kind of understanding. But there was nothing left there for her to find. Her lover, a broad-shouldered man with a cocky expression, stood up, frowning at my sudden intrusion. Hey, buddy, you better get the hell out of here, he said with a challenging tone, stepping forward as if to place himself between me and Alice. His voice was rough and aggressive, as if he was ready for a fight. I didn't move, my breathing growing heavier as I fought to contain the explosion of fury inside me. What the hell are you doing here with my woman? You son of a bitch. I spat, unable to hold back the flood of emotions threatening to consume me. The rage inside me burned hotter. Every word from my mouth felt like the crack of a whip. The situation escalated quickly. The air was thick with tension, the threat of violence hanging between us like an unspoken promise. Alice was muttering something in the background, desperately trying to defuse the situation, but her words barely reached my ears. They were nothing more than distant noise. All I could see, all I could focus on, was the man standing before me. The man who had touched her, kissed her. Alice's lover took a step forward, his expression twisting into an arrogant smirk. His fists clenched, his shoulders tensed. He was preparing himself, getting ready to throw the first punch. There was no fear in his eyes, only anger and smug confidence. This bastard thought he was in control. He had no idea what kind of hell he had just walked into. I told you to get out. He growled through gritted teeth, raising his hands as if preparing to shove me. And that was it. That was the moment I snapped. Rage consumed me. Everything inside me ignited in an uncontrollable fire of fury. Who the hell did this bastard think he was to order me around? Standing there, half naked in the house of the woman who had sworn her love to me? Acting like I was the one who didn't belong here? The moment his hand moved toward me, my instincts took over. Years of training, of survival, kicked in like a reflex. I caught his wrist in an iron grip, squeezing so hard I felt his bones shift under my fingers. A sharp, sickening crack echoed through the room. He let out a pained growl, but I didn't give him time to react. With a swift yank, I pulled him toward me and drove my fist straight into his jaw. A solid, brutal hit. The kind of hit I had delivered in a dozen fights before. He stumbled but didn't fall. Instead, like a raging bull, he lunged at me with renewed fury. His fist sliced through the air, missing my cheek by inches. I dodged, twisting to the side, and slammed my elbow into his ribs. A pained grunt escaped his lips as the air was knocked from his lungs. But he kept fighting. We clashed, crashing onto the floor, and all hell broke loose. This wasn't just a fight. It was war. I felt warm blood trickling down my face from a cut above my eyebrow. Didn't matter. Pain didn't matter. All that mattered was this moment. He was bleeding too, his lips split open, a dark bruise already forming beneath his eye. But he fought like a cornered animal. We rolled across the floor, exchanging brutal, punishing blows, each of us trying to break the other. I grabbed him by the neck and slammed his head against the edge of the coffee table. A groan escaped him, his hands went limp, but I didn't stop. All the pain, all the months of waiting, every damn letter she wrote, swearing her love, came pouring out of me with every strike. I loomed over him, my fist rising again, ready to drive it into his face with full force. "Jack, stop!" Alice's piercing scream shattered through my fury. "You're going to kill him." Her voice cut through my mind like a blade. I froze. The world around me blurred, my vision fogged with rage. My breathing was heavy and ragged. I looked down. He was lying on the floor, blood covering his face, his chest rising and falling with difficulty. I realized that one more punch, and I would actually kill him. Through the red haze of fury, through the deafening roar in my ears, I suddenly understood. It was over. I had lost. Not in battle, not in a fight, but in what I had once called love. Alice stared at me in horror, her hands covering her mouth. Slowly, I unclenched my fist. My own fist, bloody, trembling from tension. One word pounded through my skull. Betrayal. Alice's lover groaned, writhing in pain, struggling to roll onto his side. He gasped for air, his mouth opening and closing like a fish stranded on the shore. His body shook, and his eyes were filled with a mix of fear and rage. But he didn't dare fight back anymore. He knew that if he did, he wouldn't be leaving this place alive. "Fucking psycho," he muttered, coughing and wiping blood from his split lip. I watched him in silence, my breath still heavy, my fist still clenched, ready to finish the job if he so much as opened his mouth again. But he didn't test his luck. Barely pulling himself up, he hobbled toward the door, limping. Alice watched him with concern, but she said nothing. She simply clutched her hands together, as if she herself couldn't believe what had just happened. I stood motionless, tracking his every move. He grabbed his clothes from the floor, grimacing in pain as he yanked them on. And then he headed for the exit. "You're lucky I didn't kill you," I threw at him. He didn't reply. He just shot me a hateful glare and, staggering, stepped outside. The click of the lock echoed through the silence like a gunshot. Now, only Alice and I remained. I turned to her. She stood against the wall, arms wrapped around herself, her shoulders trembling. Fear, shame, and something else. Something I couldn't decipher. We said nothing. Seconds dragged out into eternity. Well, I finally spoke, my voice low and cold, laced with bitterness. Care to explain what the hell is going on here? Alice flinched, but finally lifted her gaze to mine. Her eyes were full of tears. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. I could see her struggling, see her shaking from the realization that she had just been caught. Jack, she whispered, her voice trembling. I waited. I didn't have the energy to yell. No reason to rage anymore. It had already happened. I just wanted to hear her story. I wanted to understand how the woman who wrote me letters filled with love and devotion had ended up standing here, among the ruins of our shattered future. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay in control. The anger hadn't fully faded, but now it was replaced by a painful coldness inside. I stared straight into Alice's eyes. Waiting. Who is he? I asked, struggling to keep my voice from cracking under the weight of my emotions. She inhaled sharply, as if preparing to jump off a cliff. James Lawrence, she whispered. He's a doctor. My colleague. I nodded. The name meant nothing to me, but the fact that he was someone she worked with made something inside me clench painfully. A fucking workplace homasi. A disgusting, cliché affair. How long have you been with him? I asked coldly, each word grinding its way out of me with effort. Alice shook her head, tears shimmering on her lashes. It was the first time, Jack, I swear. Her voice trembled, as if she was terrified I wouldn't believe her. I love you. My heart skipped a beat. Those words sounded so pathetic, so meaningless. I sneered, feeling my fingers curl into fists once again. You love me? I let out a bitter laugh. You love me, but you fucked another man? She sobbed, covering her face with her hands. I didn't sleep with him. She screamed. It's not what you think. I stepped closer, fighting the urge to explode again. Did he force you? My voice was low, dangerous. If she had said yes, I would have hunted that bastard down and killed him with my bare hands. Alice's tear-filled eyes snapped up to meet mine. No, Jack, it wasn't like that. Then what the hell was it? I roared, my patience snapping. What the fuck was it then? Alice inhaled sharply, her fingers gripping the hem of her sweater as if it could somehow shield her from this moment. His girlfriend left him, she finally whispered. They had been together for years, and she dumped him. He was heartbroken. He was in a really bad place. I said nothing, but my stare bored into her, burning her from the inside out. He was depressed. He started having problems at work. She continued, staring at my chest rather than my face, unable to meet my eyes. I just wanted to comfort him. We were sitting in my house. He was drinking, venting, and I felt awful for him. My jaw clenched so hard I thought my teeth might crack. And how exactly did you comfort him, Alice? I growled through gritted teeth. She let out a choked sob, squeezing her eyes shut. I didn't think. She cried out, desperate, as if that explained everything. I was just there. We were talking. I was trying to support him. He said he felt worthless, that he was empty, that no one wanted him anymore. Her voice broke. She wrapped her arms around herself, as if she was freezing. He was crying, Jack, she whispered. And then he kissed me. She lifted her tear-streaked face, her red-rimmed eyes full of pain and regret. And I kissed him back. I stared at her, stared into her swollen, wet eyes, at her trembling lips, at her hands wringing together, lost in their own guilt. I heard every single word she said. I understood every excuse she gave. And yet, something inside me broke completely. I had heard everything I needed to hear. Without a word, I turned and walked toward the door. Jack, wait, she pleaded, her voice cracking with raw desperation. Where are you going? I didn't answer. I just kept walking, leaving her behind. I felt nothing but a cold emptiness inside. Even the rage that had burned me alive just minutes ago now felt like an endless, silent ocean. Too still, too quiet, the kind of quiet that hides a real storm beneath the surface. I stepped outside, slamming the door shut behind me. My chest felt hollow. Everything I had felt for her, everything I had believed in, everything we had planned gone, shattered into dust. I climbed into a taxi, gave the driver the address of the nearest airport, and stared silently out the window. I was going back to base. This city, these streets, that house, none of it meant a damn thing to me anymore. But one feeling refused to leave me. Revenge. I could have let it go. I could have just accepted the betrayal and moved on. But fuck that. I'm not the kind of man who just swallows pain and lets it rot inside me. That bastard, that piece of shit James Lawrence. I could still see his smug, arrogant face, his pathetic attempt at threatening me in my own goddamn presence. I could still picture him standing there, half naked, in the house of the woman who had sworn she loved me. Alice could make all the excuses in the world. She could tell herself she was just comforting him. But the fact remained. She betrayed me, and I was going to make sure everyone knew about it. I couldn't just walk away and leave this story as it was. That son of a bitch had to pay for destroying my life. And Alice, she wouldn't walk away from this unscathed either. I didn't know exactly how I was going to do it, but I knew one thing. They would regret the day this ever happened. Back to base, the flight back was spent in heavy silence. By the time the plane touched down in the gray pre-dawn light, fatigue hung over me like a crushing weight. It felt like years had passed since that day in Alice's house. I was a different man now. As soon as I stepped into the barracks, the usual chatter died down. The guys knew I had been granted a week-long leave, so seeing me back this early was unexpected. Tom was the first to stand from his bunk, eyeing me with mild concern. "Shit, Jack, why are you back so soon?" His voice was cautious, as if he already suspected something had gone wrong. I tossed my bag onto the bed, ran a hand over my face, trying to wipe away the exhaustion, and finally, with calm, emotionless clarity, I said, "I don't have a fiancé anymore." Silence. Heavy, stifling, full of unspoken questions. No one pressed me for answers. I knew the guys understood. If I wanted to talk, I would. Tom gave a small nod, glancing at the others, a silent signal to leave it alone. "Got it, brother," he said simply, clapping me on the shoulder. The others stayed quiet. They knew the weight of pain. They knew what it was like to lose someone you love. Whether in battle or in life, the wounds cut just as deep. Sometimes, bullet wounds healed faster than the scars of betrayal. I sank onto my bunk, exhaled slowly, staring at the ceiling. Only one thought circled in my mind. This wasn't over. Planning the payback between missions, I wasn't just resting. I was planning. I knew I couldn't let this go. Alice and her lover had to pay for what they did. Not just pay. Their lives had to crumble just like mine did. I spent weeks calculating my next move. And then I found the perfect way. I remembered something important about Alice's hospital. There was a strict code of conduct. Any romantic or sexual relationships between colleagues were strictly forbidden. The administration believed it compromised professionalism and could lead to information leaks or abuse of authority. Violators faced serious consequences, suspensions, dismissals, even getting blacklisted from other medical institutions. But I had a problem. I had no direct proof. I could file a complaint, but a soldier's word against the reputation of a doctor and a nurse? Not good enough. I needed evidence. Videos. Witness reactions. Panic. Humiliation. And then I had an idea. I started searching for people who could help me. In a neighboring city, I found a theater group that specialized in public performances, flash mobs, and social experiments. These guys knew how to work a crowd, create unexpected scenes, and provoke strong reactions. They weren't just actors. They were masters of psychological manipulation. I contacted the studio director, a guy named Vince Carter. His voice was confident, laced with excitement. I could tell right away he loved schemes like this. "You want a flash mob? That's our specialty. What's the script?" He asked when we met at a neutral bar. I placed an envelope full of cash in front of him and laid out my plan. "Romantic relationships among colleagues are strictly forbidden inside the hospital," I said, my voice calm and calculated. "But my ex-fiancée and that bastard doctor broke the rules. I need proof, and I need this to become public. I want them caught in an uncomfortable situation, something that forces a reaction, and I want it recorded on video. Vince smirked, rubbing his chin. Oh ho, my friend, you're a real strategist. This is going to be loud. We love stories like this. We discussed the details. His team consisted of several skilled performers who could stage emotional scenes with absolute precision. Their role was to appear at just the right moment, provoke the situation, and capture reactions on many cameras hidden in their clothing. Every piece of footage would be sent to me, so I could personally track the progression of events. We need specific targets, Vince continued. Where do they usually go? When? Who among their colleagues knows about their relationship? I provided all the information they needed. When Alice and that piece of shit, James Lawrence, were usually on shift together, which hospital corridors they frequently passed through, where the blind spots were, areas without security cameras. Everything had to look like an unfortunate coincidence. Vince studied me for a moment, as if gauging just how far I was willing to go. Are you sure you want to go through with this? He asked. I lifted my gaze to him, cold, unwavering. I want them to remember this day for the rest of their lives. He nodded, understanding that I wasn't backing down. Then get ready, my friend. This is going to be a show they will never forget. The first video of the video took a few seconds to load. As soon as it started playing, I hit play and held my breath. I didn't know exactly what to expect, but a fire burned inside me with anticipation. The screen brightened. The hidden camera was discreetly placed, but the angle was perfect. The hospital cafe. A sunny day. People sat at tables, chatting quietly, drinking coffee, eating their lunch. And among them, Alice. She sat alone at a small table by the window, dressed neatly in her light blue nurse's uniform. Her hair was perfectly tied up in a bun, her posture relaxed. A plastic cup of latte rested in her hand, and her phone lay on the table. She looked calm on the surface, but something in her gaze was distant. Was she still thinking about me? Was she still shaken by the fight? I didn't care. A man approached her table, elegant, confident, with a smooth, easy smile. One of Vince's people. I narrowed my eyes, watching as he leaned slightly toward her and spoke in a pleasant, almost amused tone. Hello, are you Alice? She lifted her gaze, clearly surprised by the stranger. Yes, she replied, studying his face as if trying to remember where she had seen him before. He took a step closer, his smile widening just a fraction. The Alice who comforts her male colleagues with affection in difficult times? I froze. On the screen, Alice did too. Her face drained of color. Her lips parted slightly, but no words came out. Around her, her colleagues, doctors, nurses, orderlies continued eating, sipping coffee, chatting. But then, all conversation stopped. Some people paused, forks halfway to their mouths. A few glanced at her. Some turned their entire bodies toward her, intrigued. Alice blinked rapidly, trying to process what had just been said. What? She stammered, her hands curling into fists on her lap. But the man didn't let her recover. I admire you, he continued, his tone light and friendly, as if he were giving her a compliment. Your self-sacrifice is truly inspiring. Shame I'm not one of your colleagues. His words cracked like a whip. And before Alice could respond, the man turned around and walked away, leaving her behind in a dead, ice-cold silence. There was no sound on the video, but I could almost hear it, the clatter of silverware being placed down, the scrape of coffee cups halting midair, a sudden pause of conversations. They were all looking at her. Every single one of them. A man with graying temples, probably a senior doctor, furrowed his brows, staring at her like he was trying to remember if her name had ever come up in a disciplinary report. A woman in glasses, asterisk, an older nurse, asterisk, leaned forward, her lips pressed into a thin, disapproving line. Two young doctors at a nearby table exchanged glances. One of them bit his lip, struggling to contain a smirk. Alice's breathing turned shallow. Her eyes glistened with tears. She looked left, then right, and realized that every gaze, every face, every pair of eyes was on her. On her. Somewhere in the distance, someone let out a quiet, stifled giggle, barely audible. But Alice heard it, and something inside her broke. She shot up from her chair, knocking over a coffee cup. The liquid spilled across the table, dripped to the floor, but she didn't even notice. In tears, in panic, she whirled around and ran. The camera smoothly panned down, capturing her fleeing figure as she bolted toward the exit. Her silhouette disappeared behind the glass doors. End of video. I closed the file. The first strike had been delivered. I opened next video. A familiar setting appeared on the screen. The hospital grounds. Manicured pathways, flower beds, benches. Doctors, nurses, administrators, colleagues, professionals, people who took pride in their work. This was their world, a world where they were respected. But today, something would happen here that would change everything. The camera moved smoothly, capturing a wide-angle view. And then I saw him. James Lawrence, Alice's lover. He stood near one of the pillars by the entrance to the main building, dressed in his pristine white coat. Underneath, a tailored suit, because of course a man like him had to look the part. In one hand, a plastic coffee cup. In the other, his phone, which he scrolled through lazily, waiting for something, waiting for someone. That someone was already approaching. A young man, well-dressed, walking with confident strides. One of Vince's people. As he neared, he paused near a small group of doctors who were eating their lunch at the outdoor tables. He glanced around, as if checking something, then spoke. "Excuse me, where can I find James Lawrence?" One of the doctors lazily tilted his head in Lawrence's direction. "Over there. Much appreciated." The man strode toward Lawrence. His steps were relaxed, but in every movement there was intent. James, too absorbed in his phone, didn't notice him at first. But as soon as the man stopped directly in front of him, Lawrence lifted his head, frowning slightly. "Are you James Lawrence?" the man asked. His voice was firm, loud, unshaken. Lawrence blinked, quickly sizing him up. The confident tone, the sharp, stylish clothing. Something about him made Lawrence tense up. "Yes. What's this about?" The man smiled, a broad, effortless grin, as if he was about to give a compliment. James Lawrence. The one who sleeps with his colleague whenever his girlfriend leaves him? The air froze. Lawrence stopped breathing. His hand, the one holding the coffee cup, twitched. Someone in the crowd choked on their food. For a moment, it was as if the entire hospital grounds had dropped into a vacuum of silence. People who had been minding their own business seconds ago turned. Some glanced at him. Others fully turned their bodies. Someone exchanged a quick look with a colleague. Someone let out a quiet snort. Someone pretended they hadn't heard. But their eyes said otherwise. James swallowed. "What did you just say?" His voice was sharp now, but beneath it, there was already a crack of uncertainty. The man pretended not to notice Lawrence's reaction. "I said I admire your resilience under stress. Some people take months to recover from a breakup, but you found a way to relax in just a few days." Somewhere in the crowd, a short, suppressed laugh. Lawrence's face burned red, his lips pressed into a thin, hard line. He quickly glanced around. Eyes everywhere, watching. "Who the hell are you?" he barked, stepping forward. But the man was already stepping back, smiling. "That's not important. What matters is that now more people know about you." Then, he turned and walked away. Lawrence stood frozen. His hands trembled with rage, but he could do nothing, because the atmosphere around him had changed. The respect he once commanded was gone. The looks from his colleagues, they were different now. Evaluating, suspicious, judgmental. Someone turned away, pretending to be busy, but many still stared directly at him, their calm expressions barely concealing the growing fascination with the scandal unfolding before them. The camera captured Lawrence clenching his jaw, turning abruptly, and walking quickly into the building. End of video. I smiled. Now, they both knew. Their secret was no longer secret. The slow burn of ruin, I continued receiving new video updates. Each one was a small, precise strike. Drip by drip, their reputations were being eroded. In one video, Alice walked down a hospital corridor. Behind her, two nurses whispered to each other, pretending not to notice her presence. "Do you think I should go cry on her shoulder too? Maybe I'll get lucky. Not sure, but if your boyfriend dumps you, looks like she knows how to help." Alice's voice shaking from off-screen. "I can hear you." But the women only exchanged glances and shrugged. Another video showed Lawrence stepping out of the chief physician's office. His face was pale, his steps nervous. The camera, filming from a distance, caught him walking down the corridor. Two orderlies paused, watching him go, then muttered to each other. Word is he's got a new diagnosis, chronic horse syndrome. Well, with treatment like that, I'm not surprised. Lawrence whipped around sharply, fists clenched. But the orderlies only grinned and walked off. The final blow of the last video was the kill shot. I clicked the file and saw the chief physician's office. Alice and Lawrence sat across from him, their faces pale, their eyes filled with fear and helplessness. Behind the desk sat the chief physician, a man in his 50s with a hard, piercing gaze. His fingers were locked together. His face, empty of emotion, only disappointment, only cold professionalism. I'm not going to waste my time with explanations, he said flatly. I have several complaints about your conduct on my desk. Your off-the-clock activities have become public knowledge. Alice swallowed hard, trying to speak, but he lifted a hand, cutting off any excuses. We're not a nightclub. We're not a social lounge. The hospital does not tolerate this kind of behavior. Lawrence frowned. But you have no official proof. Seriously? The chief physician lifted his gaze, heavy and unforgiving. After the entire hospital has been gossiping about how you entertained yourself before your tears from the breakup even dried? Lawrence clenched his jaw, lowering his eyes. Alice let out a broken sob. Please, it was a mistake. The mistake was hiring you. The chief physician opened a folder, pulled out 2 sheets of paper, signed them, and set them aside. You're both fired. Silence. Alice covered her mouth with her hand, her shoulders trembling. Lawrence turned pale. You can't just throw us out. I could do whatever I see fit. The chief physician's gaze remained cold, unwavering. You no longer exist in this hospital. Pack your things and leave the premises by the end of the workday. What about recommendations? Alice's voice was strained, suffocated, like she was gasping for air. Do you honestly think I would give you recommendations? Silence. The camera captured them sitting in complete devastation, realizing that their careers in this city were over. The final update a few days later, the last piece of information reached me. Alice and Lawrence had left the city. Rumors said Lawrence had moved somewhere east, desperately searching for a new job. Alice? She had simply vanished. Without a word. Without a trace. I stared at the screen of my phone for a long time, rereading the updates. But I no longer cared where they were or what would happen to them. I had won. Game over. The return to final days on base passed quickly. My service had come to an end, and now I packed my things, preparing to return to civilian life. But this return was different. I was not the same man who had left this base last time. Not the man who had gone to his fiancée, his heart full of hope. Back then, I was a man who believed in love. A man who dreamed of a future filled with family and happiness. A man who never doubted the people he trusted. That man was gone. I had not just survived betrayal. I had avenged it. I had erased their lives, just as they had erased my trust. I no longer had illusions. I knew the worth of words. I knew what people were capable of when given the opportunity. My brothers in arms saw me off like a victor. Tom shook my hand, his gaze firm and understanding. You did it, brother. You survived. You didn't break. What now? I smiled, casting one last glance at the barracks where I had lived for so many years. Live on, but now on my own terms. The plane lifted off the ground, and I watched through the window as the military base grew smaller and smaller below. I was leaving behind not just my service, but also the part of me that had once believed in foolish fairy tales about love and loyalty. Now, I was returning a winner, and no one ever again would bring me to my knees. Dear friends, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the latest episodes. Until next time,